Hello and welcome to A Slice of Medieval. Today we are starting on a new series of Tudor specials. And when Derek and I said, if we do a Tudor special, who is the first person we should invite? We both went with exactly the same person, which is Tony Richards. Tony is a full-time UK author of best-selling historical fiction. He lives in Pembrokeshire, West Wales, and is a specialist in the lives of the Tudors. He also runs the popular Stories of the Tudors podcast and posts book reviews, author interviews, and guest blog posts on his blog. And he's also the most encouraging cheerleader any author will ever have, I'm pretty sure. For more information about Tony's books, please visit his website, tonyrichards.com, and you can also find him on Facebook and Twitter. So Tony is here to kick off our new Tudor special series, which will be running throughout 2026. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks for a great introduction.
Well, thanks for coming. And everything was true. I remember when I announced that I was writing Heroines of the Medieval World, you were the first person to get in touch and say, Sharon, when the book comes out, come on my blog.
I wanted to read it as well.
You actually got a copy before I did, if I remember right. Because they sent out the review copies first and you posted a photo of it. And I'm like, that's the first photo of my book. So, yeah, we are very happy to have you here, Tony. So I suppose we'd better start with the first of the Tudors, Henry Tudor, and his road to Bosworth and how he became king. So how turbulent was Henry's early life?
Good question. Exceptionally turbulent, because we have to remember that Henry was born right in the middle of the Wars of the Roses and really was in jeopardy the whole time. And to make matters worse, his father had been captured and died in mysterious circumstances in Carmarthen jail. They say it was of plague, but I think it was jolly convenient because he was a potential standard bearer of the Lancastrians, leaving Henry not an orphan because his mother, Margaret Beaufort, was very much alive, but in the hands of various guardians who used him like a bargaining tool and didn't look after him terribly well. At the same time, he became the new target, of course, so that the Yorkists was quickly worked out that if he was to die as well under mysterious circumstances, there'd be one less for Lancastrians to rally behind. And I think, well, I'm certain of it, that these experiences coloured his whole approach to kingship in the future and his sense of insecurity perhaps as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, he was taken away from his mum after he was about a year old, wasn't he, when she was married off to someone else?
Absolutely. So he would have not remembered any of that at all.
When he was born, though, there were quite a few other potential descendants of Edward III, weren't there?
Look what happened to them. One by one.
Yeah. Some of them even after Henry VII was dead. When did he start to aspire to the crown, though? I mean, because presumably when he was very young, he was, as you've said, more of a pawn in the whole.
Absolutely. It wasn't really until the 1480s when his mother, for a start, encouraged him to start thinking about there's a real possibility of using his very weak claim to advantage. Also, his uncle Jasper Tudor would have been quite supportive because he was fed up with being disinherited and constantly on the run, So basically all those around him started encouraging him to think about it. The snag was that, unlike some other kings and queens, he wasn't really being prepared for it at all. So that's a bit of a snag, isn't it?
Yeah, and wasn't there an incident in 1471 when Henry VI was put back on the throne, and young Henry was presented to him, and he mistook him for his son or something, and said that he was destined for the crown?
Yeah, the trouble was that, well, we know about poor old Henry VI, and basically I think that young Henry was kind of resigned to a life probably in exile, and didn't particularly mind that as an option at the time, rather than being shunted around from one noble family to another.
But it seems that didn't Margaret negotiate with Edward IV to try and get Henry back as Earl of Richmond?
Yeah, but we're still a long way from being in a position to defeat Richard III. And while we have to remember that basically the Wars of the Roses were being well and truly won by the Yorkists at the time. And so it was a dangerous place to stick your head above the parapet and say, "Hi, everybody. I'm the new leader of the Reform Party."
Yeah. I mean, because after 1471, he went into exile in Brittany, avoiding capture along the way, wasn't it? It wasn't like he just left. He was hunted, was he?
Well, they were besieged in Pembroke Castle, which is, of course, where Henry was born, and they escaped. Just when I say they, it's Henry and his uncle Jasper. They escaped from a cave underneath the castle, which I've been in, and it's called Wogan's Cave, by the way, and it gives access to the river, and it would have been easy at night to slip out of there unnoticed, and then they found some horses and rode to Tenby, which is on the coast. And in Tenby, Jasper had a house, and there were secret tunnels underneath town, which led to the harbour, because the town was absolutely full of Yorkists who would have been delighted to capture Henry Tudor. It would have been a big reward for that. And some people say to this day, I hear it said, that the whole thing about the tunnels under Tenby is a myth. But my wife and I have been down the tunnels and walked as far as we could dare to, really, because it gets more and more unstable. And there's actually, I don't know if you know about Tudor onion bottles. They're like very bulbous with a long neck. And you can see those lying around. Some of them are not even broken. So it's a real sense of traveling back in history. And from there, they would have caught a boat in the harbour, and they sailed across to Brittany. So we actually followed in their footsteps all the way to Brittany, and then to the castle in the forest where Henry Tudor was in exile. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I could see why he'd be happy to stay there for the rest of his life. It's a beautiful part of the world.
It is, yeah. I've done Brittany. It is stunning.
But he was kind of chucked out of Brittany, wasn't he? And had to go to France.
It was very complicated because the Dukes of Brittany didn't get on terribly well with the French, even though I think of them all as French these days. And they were using him as a bargaining chip. So it seems the story of his youth that he's like, every time he has to be careful who his friends are. But the French decided that he could be very useful to them, so they also saw him as a useful card in their hand. But what started happening was that disaffected nobles started coming across from England to find Henry and to offer him their support.
Yeah, it all kicks off in 1483, really, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
and some of them were quite powerful and influential people, and they brought messages from really uh, people that were thought of as quite loyal Yorkists, who
Mm.
said if he came back with an army, then they might change sides. So there's all lots of ifs and buts and maybes, no guarantees, by
Yeah,
the way.
there never were.
No.
What I find remarkable, and I've said this loads of times, is that in the autumn of 1483, you've suddenly got this groundswell of support, as you say, exiles going across to Henry Tudor. I mean, none of those people know anything at all about Henry Tudor, do they really? He's pretty much unknown. And yet they are prepared to leave the country for him instead of a king, Richard III, who's sort of got established reputation and so
It's,
on.
it's all to do with a figurehead that you can rally around. And they're not daft. They could see, even if the figurehead was quite inexperienced,
Yeah.
that meant they had more influence as advisors, you see.
Hmm.
If you think it's almost like a Game of Thrones thing
Yeah.
where you've
Little
got
did they know.
but they, if they're ambitious and they feel a bit hard done by, perhaps they've had their lands reduced or taxed or something like that, or worse, and they saw their future might be to rally around a Lancastrian base, you see, and
Yeah.
there weren't many of those left by then.
Yeah, and
No.
it's Yorkists who are going mainly, isn't it? It's people who've been
Yeah.
staunch Edward IV men in the
Uh,
local areas of southern England, particularly.
my theory is that uh, Richard III started off as quite a popular king, and gradually, if you saw it on a graph, it would slowly head towards the bottom right-hand corner. He was getting more and more
Mm.
unpopular because
Well,
of
if you start off with a coup, then it's not really a very good start.
No.
Yeah, and it is quite remarkable. I mean, as you said, the French, the Bretons, and so on, the English, everybody regarded Henry as a kind of a pawn in their particular game.
yeah.
But do you think even the French thought when they backed Henry that he'd actually succeed in 1485?
Well, they put their money where their mouth was
Yeah,
because they gave him ships. They gave him between 2 and 3,000 trained, experienced mercenaries who
yeah,
were only in it for the money, so they had to be paid. And Henry didn't
yeah,
have any money. He went on
yeah,
exile with what he had in his pockets, I think.
yeah,
And so he didn't have much means to accumulate wealth when he was in Brittany. And that they must have thought it was a 50-50 chance.
mm,
But the key to it all was being able to build support and turn, let's say, 3,000 mercenaries into a viable army by the time they got to Bosworth. And
yeah,
then um, and enough, it would be a tipping point, enough Yorkists would either look the other way or see where their bread was buttered and decide uh, to back a winner,
Mm.
you see.
yeah. By the time we get to Bosworth, we've got 20,000 people looking the
Yeah.
other way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm just thinking, when Henry IV invaded in 1399, it's like he comes with a small army and he gathers support as he marches from it's Ravenspur. And he
I think, yeah.
marches and he gathers troops as he goes. And Edward IV does the same thing in 1471. And they're always given as similar incidents. Now, when Henry VII landed with just his few thousand French troops and his disaffected Yorkists and loyal Lancastrians, that would have been the same thing then, wouldn't it? But he landed in Haverfordwest.
It's very close to where I live, where I'm speaking from now, and it's called Mill Bay.
Right.
Yeah.
And my wife and I went to Mill Bay, And there's a nice plaque there confirming, yes, you are at the right place. This is where Henry Tudor landed with his mercenaries. And even to this day, it's very rare to see anybody else in Mill Bay. It's a sheltered, stony bay, not a sandy one, and a steep hill leading up out of it. But that means that unless you actually head down into the bay, you can't see much what's happening in there. Perfect spot. And the reason that he chose that was that he had to get everything unloaded and at least underway and organized and ready to defend themselves, because they didn't know they might meet a Yorkist patrol or something. And because he'd grown up in the area and because he'd lived in Pembroke, which is not far away, and Jasper lived in Tenby, they was certain that Mill Bay was a good place to start.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in the autumn of 1483, if he's going to land anywhere, it's the south coast. He sort of made a kind of abortive attempt. But I just wonder whether in 1483, the decision makers about all of these things, it was Buckingham was involved and so on, were other people, whereas in 1485, maybe it was him and Jasper who had more of a say.
You're spot on there. That's exactly right. And you can tell by, especially when you stand in Mill Bay and look, you can see if they landed anywhere else on the south coast, they'd be spotted within 5 minutes, and their trumpets would sound, and they'd find they were facing an army of more than 3,000 people, picking them off as they got off the boats, you know?
Well, the other thing was they knew they were coming, didn't they?
Yeah, but the by the time they got to Dale, which is the first sort of town, they were already building up a bit of a following, and that was only the first town, you know. So they worked their way up sort of diagonally across Wales, and one of the first threats to them was I call him a warlord, but he was a powerful figure, Sir Ap Thomas, who had a band of very experienced fighting men, and they were permanently on guard in case the English attacked them.
Yes.
So they like the French, they had to make a decision: do we back this guy, or and join him, or do we turn him back? You know, and they of course they joined him, and you know, it is thought that Sir Ap Thomas was the person that delivered the fatal blow to Richard III. And interestingly, his tomb is in Carmarthen, which is also not far from where I live. And you can stand there and there's a little display about him and stuff like that. And you think, you know, this is a person that most people don't even know the name of, but changed history.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, because if he'd opposed Henry at that point, I think Henry would be going back to his ships.
Yeah.
So he's going across Wales. He's gathering a bit of support. He's got Rhys ap Thomas has joined him, and there are probably one or two other such, not as powerful perhaps, but similar.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But it helped, you see, because once you had a figure like that, it gave him credibility with the Welsh, and so disaffected Welsh people who were, we have to remember, just like today, they're thought of, if at all, as kind of second-class citizens, you know. They started on the BBC showing a map of the country with Wales not included, which I don't quite understand.
No.
Anyway, the funny thing was that when they got to Shrewsbury, the mayor of the town, who was obviously a Yorkist, barred the gates and refused them entry, and that was the only real opposition they had, all the way from Mill Bay, all the way up through to Bosworth, which I find fascinating because there were so many critical moments when they could have been ambushed, surrounded, besieged, you know, whatever, in the middle of the night, perhaps, and it didn't happen.
Was it easier just with all these things when some pretender comes along? Is it easier and safer to sit on your hands for a while and just see how things work out. Because if you make the wrong decision, and the wrong decision, the easiest way to make a wrong decision is to take action against him. But if you do that and you end up on the wrong side, that's you done,
Yeah.
and your family and their lands and all the rest of it. So I just think probably the safe decision was to do nothing and say, oh, well, I couldn't help, you know.
So when did Richard learn of the invasion, and what did he do if there was no opposition until Shrewsbury and then nothing after that? What was Richard doing?
He was complacent at first, and then obviously eventually the word got through, and he very quickly, as he was an experienced commander, and he very quickly assembled his best army that he could, and turned up at Bosworth ready to see off the Pretender.
But he was worried about the Stanleys, wasn't he? For good reason, obviously.
Yes.
But I mean, the Stanleys, it seems to me, were absolutely critical
Yeah,
in the whole thing, because not only did they not take action against Henry, as you've said, they were one of those that just held back when they could easily have intervened. William's family
definitely.
could have intervened,
Yeah,
but they didn't. And then, of course, obviously at Bosworth, events unfolded in a different way as well from them. But they are critical, aren't they, in the success or failure of the whole thing?
absolutely. Yeah. And this is where I think Margaret Beaufort's influence shouldn't be underestimated, because the whole time since probably, well, for 5 years, she'd been lobbying, and perhaps she was very wealthy. She might have been bribing people
Yeah,
or
more than likely.
sweet talking them, but basically gently nudging them in the right direction without being obvious about it, which is why a lot of people aren't really aware, even to this day, of how much she not manipulated, because she was doing it for her son, not for herself, but she made it possible if all the things were pointing in the right direction, you know?
Mm.
So she increased the probability of success.
Yeah, I've always felt, and I totally agree with that, but I've always felt that nobody influenced Thomas Stanley at all, and that he was always influenced by
Oh,
what he
no,
thought was going to get him the best deal. And,
absolutely.
it still seems to me, I don't know whether you've got an answer on this. How soon did he actually firmly commit to Henry? Because as I understand it, he did commit to him.
During the battle, I think.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, even then he
No,
didn't, because it was William.
yeah, but no, it was literally when the writing was on the wall, I think. And this is the thing with
Yeah,
these ambitious nobles, is, as you've already said, you've got to be very careful what you decide, because if you decide the wrong
yeah,
way, you could end up having your head cut off.
And I suppose Stanley
yeah,
didn't have to decide too soon, did he? Because
No,
he was married to Henry's mum. So even if he left it till the last minute to commit, once
yeah,
he'd seen which way it was going, if Richard had won, then it'd been like, well, I didn't help my stepson.
that's right. Yeah,
And when Henry won, it's like, talk to your mother, you
it's
know?
called hedging your bets, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Well, when I believe when Richard sent word to Thomas Stanley and said, "Well, why aren't you doing something at an earlier point in the battle?" He said, "Well, I'm sitting on the road to London in case in case he makes a run for it, sort of
Good
thing."
answer.
Uh, he always had an answer,
Yes.
Thomas Stanley. But I don't. Yeah, it's a funny one. People make all sorts of statements on about the Stanleys, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure where the evidence necessarily is one way or the other.
I don't think there is that much evidence,
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, he's not going to write those sort of things down, is he?
no, but it does appear
And
that they met before Bosworth
yes, yeah.
at an abbey. But even the evidence for that is, I mean, it's not
It's
strong,
all
but
very thin.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
So we've got Henry's landed in Wales. He's marched via Shrewsbury and he's marching to the Midlands. How did they decide on Bosworth as the battlefield?
It's physical location, and I think it was a little bit arbitrary, quite honestly. It's just the way these things. if you've been to the Bosworth
Yes.
battle, yes, so you can see it makes a good battlefield, doesn't
Mm.
it? And they didn't want to go any further. I think they'd marched a long way, and so they had to pick somewhere to set up camp and entrench, and then wait and see what happened. Really,
Well, because the king was at Leicester, I think, wasn't he? So it was very
yeah,
close to where he was.
yes, but they didn't want to march right into his
No,
heartland either.
no.
So it was the Tudor contingent that decided Bosworth. We might as well. Here's as good a place
Well,
as any.
this is another thing that I've never found proper evidence of, but I'm just
Mm.
applying logic and the fact that um, I've travelled there from here as well. And
Mm.
basically, even in a car, it seems quite a long way. Imagine marching and having to forage for your provisions on the way, the whole time being under
Mm.
threat of ambush or attack or
Mm.
whatever. So you think
Mm.
this looks like a good place. It's close
Yeah.
enough but far
Yeah,
enough.
because you get to Leicester when you're driving
Yeah.
to Bosworth, you get to Leicester and think, oh, it's only 10 minutes away. And half an hour later, you're there going, where the heck is Bosworth? Because it's all down country lanes.
That's right. Yeah,
Well, and of course, in those days, there were so few landmarks. There were no great buildings or anything, or not many. And so
that's right. We have
you
to.
had to sort of find your
Mm.
way with probably local
Yeah,
guides and people, because you were using open country and back lanes and all the rest of it.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting how these places are decided upon, but often I think you're right. It's, well, we've come far enough. Let's sort of, this is a reasonable place. Although it wasn't a very good place because Richard had the high
Mm.
ground, but I guess that's just how it fell out at the time, really.
yeah, definitely.
So we get to Bosworth, and Henry's always been regarded, well, he's always been regarded as fairly aloof, but at Bosworth, he's regarded as kind of standing back from the battle and not directing it. How much influence did he have on that, do you think?
Well, there was jolly good reason for that. Firstly, he had no experience of battles. I'm not even convinced he was a good swordsman,
Yeah.
you know. He might have drawn his sword and had a bit of a go with
Mm.
it, but I can't imagine him doing like Richard did, charging the enemy, at the head of his army. That's not how it worked. And the other thing was he had a great big target painted on his back
Yeah.
because all they had to do was kill him or capture him,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
battle was won.
Yeah.
So um, I think, well, in my Tudor trilogy, I concluded that Jasper Tudor gave him no choice and surrounded him with some really experienced fighters
Mm.
in a vantage point where he could see everything that was going on. And I think if it went badly, they were ready to scarper,
Mm.
They were ready to
Yeah.
uh, fast horses. Let's go back to Mill Bay again and hope the ships are still there.
Yeah.
So, um, and what they did was quite a good thing. They had William Brandon and a bunch of other experienced fighters carried the standard
Mm.
um, a little distance away, and so any reasonable person would expect the, um, the Henry Tudor to be quite close to the standard. In fact, he was watching it through binoculars, probably, if they'd been invented. And no, seriously, it was tactical.
Yeah.
And you know, what I find interesting is that we went to the brilliant Bosworth reenactment, and it was, I think, 99%
Mm.
Yorkist supporters, and just my wife and I cheering for Henry Tudor, and you would believe that Richard had won. And I wouldn't have been surprised if the reenactment reversed history,
They did one year,
because
didn't they?
even to
They
this
did one
day,
year.
sorry.
They changed it one year so that Richard won.
Oh, they did. Oh, luckily I wasn't there that year. But no, I was quite surprised at the strength of feeling, even to this day, in support of Richard III. You know, I know it's the Ricardians and things,
Mm.
but
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I suppose at Bosworth is he also happens to have in his pocket one of the best military commanders of his day, which is the Earl of Oxford, who basically, without the Earl of Oxford, we
yes,
wouldn't be talking about
that's
Bosworth
a
at
good
all.
point. That's a very
Um,
good point.
he
And
basically does the hard work,
and
doesn't
he had the tools to work with, because give him people like Sir Isaac Thomas and his warriors.
he?
That's which what they were. Just by the way, they were just sort of people that don't
Mm.
play by the rules. So they're not chivalrous. They're brutal. You know, you add into the mix best part of 3,000 French mercenaries who are
Mm.
wanting to be paid on by results,
Yeah,
and the Earl of Oxford and all these different components. And then what happens is that Richard III decides to charge the lot of them, not single-handedly, but pretty much brandishing his sword. And that was the opposite tactics to Henry's
Mm.
tactics, wasn't it?
yes, yeah. I
The
mean, it
absolute
came
opposite.
pretty close to success, though. I mean, I think it's fair to say Richard would have won apart from William Stanley's intervention.
And that's an interesting one, because we'll never know, will we? We
Well,
will never be able to tell. And then we would have never
what
had Henry
Yeah.
VIII.
good news.
But didn't Percy stay on their side as well, though? Didn't Percy stay out of the fighting?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
they nearly all did, because there was nothing to be gained by getting killed for either
No.
side, was there? So the thing, as we've already said, is to um, just be a bit clever with your decision making, and see which way the wind's blowing. And there was a tipping point, you see, which is when Richard III disappeared under a pile of angry
Mm.
mercenaries and things. And then people that were wavering and sitting on the fence um, could see that they might as well declare for the Tudors. Oh, there's another factor here as well, that I nearly forgot to mention, was that, of course, we all know Margaret Beaufort had um, come up with this idea of Elizabeth of York marrying her son, which
Yes.
Mm.
would then be potentially an end to the Wars of the Roses, and unify, stop the Civil War and unify the country. So it was quite a clever idea, really. And it seems that Henry and Elizabeth got on as well, which was a bit of a bonus, wasn't it? There could have been so many problematic age difference or anything, but it just was one of those things in history which kind of worked out.
Hmm.
Mm.
Um, I know there were a few more battles which are counted as part of the wars of what we now call the Wars of the Roses, but
Hmm.
really, that did mark the end of it.
I mean, I think in historical terms, the Stanley brothers tend to be lumped together about Bosworth, where for me, they are chalk and cheese. It's completely different motives because
Yeah.
William Stanley had already been outed as a traitor. Thomas hadn't. So
Yeah,
for
that's a
William
bit.
Stanley, a victory for Richard was the end. He's dead and gone if Richard wins.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So he had to act. Thomas didn't. So the reason William intervenes is because he has no choice, really. He
Mm.
can't see Richard win or he's gone. And people say, oh, well, it was a well-timed intervention. Well, that's just rubbish, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's impossible to time it so that you just happen to arrive in a medieval battle in the nick of time.
Ready to fight.
Yes. Yeah. But it was decisive, I think. And,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, the rest, as I say, history. And we mentioned Northumberland. Well, that was a classic Northumberland action. In other words, inaction. But he had a large army, didn't he, in Northumberland? I mean,
Yes.
uh,
Yes. And on paper, if you look at it really dispassionately, as I think you've already said, that the Yorkists should have won
Mm.
that.
Mm.
But I think the pivotal moment was Richard III himself making a tactical error, and bravely leading a charge without enough people around him or immediately behind him to safeguard him.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
that was very much his character, I think, wasn't it? It was how he
Yes,
saw things.
absolutely.
And he came
Like sort of
very close to
invincible.
success, though, you know, very, very close to success. And therefore, I guess I tend to say, I mean, I'm not a Ricardian, but I tend to say, well, on that occasion, his vanguard was gone, shot through. It was a gamble, but if he didn't want to retreat and leave, then it was his best gamble, really, was just to go for the throne.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
that's
Mm.
and
right.
people say, oh, well, it was stupid, but it wasn't stupid. It was just a gamble.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
tactical
yeah,
gamble. And it was made in the heat of the
yeah,
moment as well. We have to remember that.
yeah,
You don't
exactly.
get a lot of chance to plan this, do you? You know,
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
That's true. We all think, you can look at the possibility, the options he had and say he could have done this or he could have done
yeah,
that. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, but you don't have all the options at your fingertips at that moment. You have just got to act.
yeah,
that's right.
yeah. Bosworth must have more people involved that weren't involved in any other medieval battle.
Well, one thing I was thinking, you've just had me thinking about, and it's more, is this true or not? Norfolk got a note saying, "Jockey of Norfolk, be not for so bold, for Dick and thy master is bought and sold." Is that true?
Well, I must admit that all my research has been very much focused on the Tudor side rather than the Yorkist side. So in my books, I try to show a bit of balance
Mm.
because I know how passionate. My own mother was a passionate Ricardian, by the way, with a picture of Richard III on a wall in her living room. So, um, that's so I'm very aware of there's
She
to
must be
this
so
day,
proud.
to this day, there are strongly held feelings
Yeah.
um, on both sides, on both sides. So I'm sensitive to that. But having said that, what happened is what happened.
Mm,
And in my books, I try and be as faithful as I can, but based on evidence, like yourself, is that if you can't find any evidence of it,
Mm.
you have to qualify the thing by saying
yeah.
it is sometimes said that or something like that.
Mm,
But I tend to omit it entirely, because there's a danger of perpetuating myths,
Yes.
yeah.
and then people quote you then
Yeah, that's right.
without all of the rest of the context, you know.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I think with Northumberland. I mean, obviously he had the decisive force, which whatever whoever he
yeah,
supported, if he actually went for it, whoever he supported would have won the battle because he had
but
so many men. But he didn't do anything, and you've got to ask yourself the question: why didn't he do anything? Did he know
yeah,
something else? Was he working on some other scheme? And for me, I think he was. I think he knew that all the key heirs and heiresses were actually in Yorkshire at Sheriff
yeah,
Hutton. And he was just waiting to see, well, what if both Henry and Richard are killed?
yeah,
Which is highly
Mm.
possible. Um,
absolutely, yeah,
what maybe I can be a power broker then, because obviously
yeah,
Stanley saw himself as a power broker, Thomas Stanley. And I think both of them were sort of thinking, well, okay, let's see what happens for a while. And then we can make the best of it afterwards.
yeah,
Um, he's always, Ricardians particularly will always say, oh, well, he was a traitor and he let Richard down and all the rest of it. But I don't think people in modern times put themselves in the position of one of these great
Mm.
magnates of the 15th century, how crucial what they do is for their
and
family's
I,
future.
I don't know if history at school has changed now, but when I was taught history, it was like let's do 10 minutes on the Battle of Bosworth. Right, now let's move on to Henry VIII and his 6 wives. I think, hang on,
Yeah,
what
that's
about
right.
Henry VII? Oh, he was a
He
miser.
was
He was a
boring.
miser. Um,
He was a miser who wouldn't let his wife
yeah.
speak and
So,
listened too much
so
to his
let's move
mother.
on. And it was awful. And then, next thing I knew, we were talking about the English Civil Wars.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
the Spanish Armada.
Oh
It's
yeah, Spanish Armada. Let's not forget
horribly
that.
misrepresented.
Yeah. Yeah, it's broad brushstroke
Yeah.
history, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But it's very, I mean, I've said this
Yeah.
loads of times. It's very influential on what sort of the man in the street
Oh
thinks,
yeah.
it has
It's
an impression of, they're
well
not
these
necessarily
days.
feeling strongly about it, but their idea of what
These days we've
happened.
got television dramas like The Tudors, which did make me cringe. I couldn't watch it all actually. Um, but there are other things like The White Princess and stuff like that, which
Yeah,
Mm.
they
hopefully.
nearly tell the story as it was, but then fail to. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the popular misconceptions come from. And
yeah.
there's whole generations of people now that think Margaret Beaufort was evil and probably killed the
I
princess.
know, I
And
know.
Mm.
think, hang on,
Yes.
where'd you get that from? She was virtually a nun.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. I mean, we had we spent some time. Who did we have talking about Margaret Beaufort? Lauren
Lauren
oh yeah,
Johnson.
she's
Johnson.
We
good.
had her talking about Margaret Beaufort, and it was so nice to actually have a
Yeah,
discussion that
I've got her book.
talked
Yeah,
about reality to some
yes,
extent
Yeah.
rather than myth. But it's people are vilified at the drop of a hat these days.
Mm.
Um,
it's a shame. But our
yeah.
job is to
It,
put the balance back again.
Yes,
That's what I've always
yes.
believed, and I've
yeah,
I've actually had people contact me and say, my son has been studying your Tudor trilogy and is now like very passionate about history. They don't say historical fiction or reading novels, or they say
yeah,
about history.
yeah,
It's kind of um, built a fascination with history in him that is like become quite important to him. And I
yeah,
think that's the best compliment that you can have, really, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, I certainly know that reading your books, I trust your research. So I know that when I'm reading
Thank you.
it,
Yeah.
I'm getting
Yeah,
not just the facts as
But the
well as the
thing is,
story.
by actually going all the way, following in their footsteps in exile and standing in the tower where Henry actually would have stood looking out the window, there's no substitute for that.
no,
It's primary source,
No.
and you get the sense of place and geography, and in fact, because it's so remote, even the time you might as well be have time travel back in time.
yeah,
The fact it's all
Mm.
falling down and cobwebby, it would have been a little bit grander than that. But I
mm,
found it fascinating.
mm, yeah,
Yeah, I must say I do as well. Actually being there, even, just standing in a
Yes. Oh,
cathedral
yes.
or a castle, and you can just feel the history
Mm,
around you, especially if there's nobody else
yeah.
there. That's brilliant because you can just, you know, the walls do speak.
yeah. I mean, it can be hard because obviously it's hundreds and hundreds of years ago because the landscape in some cases is very, very different.
Yeah.
Um, I remember going to the battlefield of Edgecote, the 1469 battle, and walked across that with my wife, and we were struggling to find the stream that was
Yeah.
central to it, and it's about this wide, and it's a trickle of water, and then you've got to imagine that yes, there's a slope going up, and you try and picture how that would have been,
Yeah.
in the 1400s. But it does help,
Mm.
even a different landscape from the one at the time does help to give you that sense of scale and
But
and so on.
we're really lucky where I live in that we can get to Pembroke Castle in less than half an hour, and you can go down to that cave I referred to. You can go up. They actually now think Henry was born in a building within the castle grounds, which no longer exists, but
Mm,
archaeologists are
Mm.
studying that. and then you, like I said, you can go through the tunnels in Tenby. Well, most people can't, but we managed to get special permission. And, so that's quite compelling because it turns possible myth into
Yeah.
plausible reality
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have just marched down the street to the harbour because they would have got grabbed on the way. But by going through the tunnels, nobody would even be aware of it.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So Henry VII is himself, 1485, 22nd of August, he becomes King of England. And like I say, he was a miser. He didn't treat his wife well. He moved his mum into the bedroom next to his so he could talk to her all the time. Is that it? Was he a
Not
tyrant?
at all. Well, it depends how you define tyrant. If you're talking about um, uh, arbitrary acts of violence and ignoring the law, and this reminds me of somebody, I can't think who, very topical all of a sudden, but basically
Yeah.
acting without any observation of conventions or anything like that, then Henry wasn't a tyrant. He didn't qualify. What he was sometimes harsh with people, and that's part of his insecurity, I think.
Mm.
So, like pretenders in particular that suddenly popped up. We won't go into those now.
No.
There's so many. There's not time, is there? And there's probably more that we don't even know about. We've yet to uncover. But at the end of the day, what we have to remember is, despite what you've said about his rule, he laid the foundation for the future Tudor dynasty and set the conditions. In terms of being a miser, he used to spend a fortune on his own clothes. You
Mm.
know, there are
Mm.
records of expenditure to this
Yeah.
day which can be studied and show that he didn't uh, uh, economize at all. You know, he was a peacemaker. He was always trying to negotiate with France and things about treaties and deals where they would not be going to war. And also, he started setting up systems of governance, bearing in mind he had no experience of governance
Mm.
at all, but he was surrounded by good advisors, and he set up the systems of governance which still continue to this day, which I
Mm.
find amazing,
Mm.
really.
Mm.
And what the third book of my Tudor trilogy is all about this is where he becomes king and doesn't really have a clue. Is his main job is to make sure that other people don't realize that. And
Mm.
like political leaders in the country these days, if they've never been a leader of a party before, then they have to make sure they've got jolly good advisors because otherwise
Mm.
everything goes horribly wrong. And he did make mistakes, of course, well, anybody would.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, I count his reign as a success because basically, he left um, successors. So that's something to be said, isn't it? And that
Mm.
uh, he laid, as I say, laid the foundation for a new style of kingship and or queenship, and certainly, Elizabeth I would never have had the same kind of opportunities if there'd never been Henry VII.
The other thing,
Yes, that's
Sharon
true.
and I have said this quite a lot, is that when people view someone like Henry VII, a king or whoever, they tend to view him as a sort of constant person all the way through their reign.
Oh, that's
They don't
interesting.
take account of the
Yeah,
fact that he's young when he starts and inexperienced,
yeah,
and towards the end of the reign, he's got all these other problems which occur, which,
yeah,
his wife dies and sons
yeah.
die and so on. And in human terms, I mean, none of us are unaffected by those sorts of things.
That's right.
And yet we
Yeah.
assume that this Henry VII label is the same throughout the reign. which is ludicrous if you think about it, but it's what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And of course, he was in great pain towards the end of his
Yeah,
reign, and
yeah,
that does make life very difficult. And, he insisted that his son Henry was in the room next door this time and not allowed to do anything, not allowed to do jousting or
yeah.
play football in the yard, nothing. He had to be kept safe at all costs.
Mm.
It's a familiar
Yeah,
thing.
wrapped up in cotton
That's
wool.
right. Or tried to.
Yeah.
That worked well, really, didn't it?
Yeah.
The less said about Henry VIII, the
And
better. But
yeah. We're going to have to cover him in a
yeah, I
Tudor
think we
special.
are. Yeah,
Or maybe we just do
I
6 episodes on his
I
wives.
recommend Judith Arnott for Henry VIII because her series about him is exceptional.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, Judith is very
Very
good.
good.
So do you think, I mean, there's this idea that Margaret Beaufort was his chief advisor and she was the one but she was the one who had been on the ground throughout the Yorkist reign. So when Henry came to the throne, he had all these people around him who were his advisors, but were also had ulterior
Absolutely.
motives
Yeah.
about themselves. Whereas Margaret was his mum.
Somebody he could really trust and not have to second guess or anything like that. I think she was quite a plain speaking person and always had her son's best interests at heart, as you would expect a mother to do. And, it must have been strange for her to outlive him, don't you
Yeah,
think?
it must have been.
How well would he have known her though? Because he hadn't seen her for years, had he?
Oh no, they would have
Yeah,
been strangers. They would have been
yeah,
strangers to each other, and they would have had to slowly relearn. But that's how it was. They didn't have any choice, and she was in it for the long haul
yeah.
anyway. And I think she was quite a good listener, perhaps, and was quite considerate, really, in terms of his own
Mm.
weaknesses and insecurities, and understood them as
Yes,
well.
yeah, yeah. She would have done, wouldn't she? She'd
Yeah,
been there and sort of got the t-shirt and so on.
Mm,
Yeah, it's an interesting one because that relationship between the two of them has been hacked about by historians quite a lot. Um, but it doesn't seem that complicated to me, really.
it's it's a
yeah.
mother-son relationship when all said and done.
Especially someone who'd been
Mm,
forcibly parted from her
yes.
son as well. It's not like anything was her choice.
Oh yes, that would make you even more
Yeah.
determined. Yeah,
Mm,
and she didn't have the distraction of any
Mm.
other
yeah.
children.
Yeah.
And just speaking about how, the end of the reign
Yeah.
is, like Derek said, a lot of people just see this constant person throughout the reign. Do you think that that's why he gets the miser label? Because at the end of the reign, he left a full treasury for Henry VIII to play with. And it's like, oh, he must have been a miser throughout to
Um,
have all this money left at the end of it.
he learnt
Mm,
the benefit of having a full treasury because
Mm,
that is power. Money is power, and there's a difference between being miserly. You
mm,
think of Scrooge counting a pile of pennies,
yeah.
but actually, instead of going to war, which takes all the money in the treasury, sorting out some kind of deal before the war even
mm,
starts, and that was his
Mm,
style. And like I've already said, he used to spend money like water at times, but generally he was quite focused on stability and sustainability and into the
mm.
future for his son.
I think the spending on his clothes and so on was very much an image thing, wasn't it?
Definitely,
To project a court which was powerful and wealthy and so
that's
And you
on.
see
right.
that in the
Yeah,
pageantry as well.
it doesn't really fit with the
But
miserly, does it? Then
No.
no, and I think you can't win as a king. If you spend all the money, you're an idiot. And if you keep all the money, you're a miser. If you have a full treasury, you can't win, can you?
I mean, the thing is, you're not allowed to make money. Somebody has to have given you a full treasury.
Yeah. Okay, so what are you working on now, Tony?
Well, after 14 years, it took me 14 years to write 12 books. I spent nearly, well, a year at least of research. So I was always researching at least one book ahead if I could, looking for everything. And of course, in the early days, there's so little
Yeah.
actual documentation to look at. I've got an Elizabethan series, and Elizabeth obviously finally dies at the end of that, and the Stuarts arrive on the scene. And I thought, all I know about the Stuarts was that Charles I got his head cut off when there were the civil wars. Knew almost nothing about James or his wife Anna of Denmark. It was all just a sort of vague little bits and pieces I picked up over the years. So I decided I would write a Stuart trilogy, and I've just completed the first book of that. Well, I say completed it. I've completed the first draft of the first book, so it's going to the editor next month now. I'm just doing the last read through, and that is about Anna of Denmark from her first meeting with James right through to her death. And I found it fascinating because there's so many
Yeah.
familiar things and so many unfamiliar things,
Yeah.
and that so it was fascinating to find myself in Copenhagen and putting bits of Danish in the book, and trying to put myself into the mindset of a 14-year-old Danish princess being suddenly faced by this rather unusual figure of James of Scotland, who she could barely, and well, she couldn't really understand him because their common language was French, and she couldn't understand French with a Scots accent. You see. Anyway, the 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 idea is that I'm going to follow on the story of the Stuarts then, but each time through the eyes of the wife of the king.
Good. Go the women.
Yeah, it is,
Yes. Yeah.
and do something to restore their place in history.
Yeah. Thank you. Well done.
Because if
That's what I like to
you
hear.
ask, if you stop somebody at random in the street and say, who were the first Stuart Queen consorts? How many can you name? Would they even know Anna of Denmark? I don't know.
Probably not. No.
Would they get as far as Henrietta Maria of France? I don't think
Probably.
so.
That's probably your best bet, I think.
So anyway, that's what I'm enjoying now, and I'm now researching Henrietta Maria, and there's so many great stories in there, with each of them, and
Oh, Henrietta Maria is brilliant. I think I read a Jean Plaidy years ago about their daughter, Henriette. And yeah, because Henrietta Maria took Henriette to France with her, it was like you saw both
yeah,
lives.
well,
And yeah, it was
I'm
fascinating.
avoiding reading anything like that and
Yeah, I can imagine.
sticking to well-researched historical books rather than historical novels. And basically, I'm working from first principles. So everything I'm learning is new and fresh and fascinating.
Yeah.
So with the Tudors, I already knew quite a lot about the Tudors, like most people think they do. But with the Stuarts, I'm quite happy to admit that I knew almost nothing about Anna of Denmark. I knew that she liked masks and was thought of as frivolous, but then when you look into Ben Jonson's story and you know all the the political importance of masks, that they used to fill the seats with ambassadors to impress them, and they would spend as much as £3,000 on one mask. And this was all Anna of Denmark's influence, really, to go off the scale.
Yeah.
And I just find it fascinating.
Yeah,
that
it sounds really
whole
interesting.
new ball game.
Different. Yeah.
Yes, fresh. It's refreshing for me. I
Mm.
wouldn't say I was tired of the Tudors because I enjoyed doing all of that, but there was nowhere else to go after
Yeah.
Elizabeth I died.
Yeah. 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 No, that sounds like a really good direction to go in, actually.
Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Sure, that'll be popular.
Yeah,
Yeah, be out,
definitely.
Yeah.
be out this year. I'm still not used to it being 2026.
I know the feeling.
It'll be out. It'll be out. Watch this space. It'll
Yeah.
be out sometime this year.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Tony, for such a fascinating discussion and a great way to kick off our Tudor specials with a rise of Henry VII.
I've enjoyed it. I think we've raised some interesting questions for people to think about as well.
Yeah.
You know, because we've gone in some areas which are really still to be bottomed out, aren't they? And what I find great is that people they discover some document
Yeah.
in the Windsor archives or something, and they say, "Oh, look, we found out who killed the princess
Yeah.
in the tower." You know?
Let's not go
And
there.
no, but what I mean is, you never know what there is still to be
Yeah.
That is
uncovered,
true.
and
Yeah.
so the jigsaw puzzle slowly turns into a
Mm.
picture, and that's
Yeah.
fascinating. But thank you
Mm.
very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed it. The time's gone very
It
quickly,
has.
and I look forward to seeing what happens next in this series.
So do we.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Tony. It's been
Yeah. Thanks
lovely.
again.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
That was a perfect way to kick off our Tudor series. Back to the medieval next time. Well, I'm really excited about this. We've got Max Adams joining us to talk about the history of Mercia and the rise of King Arthur. So do join us wherever you get your podcasts. I've been Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And remember, you can find us on your normal podcast provider or YouTube. Thanks for listening.